What makes a great movie scene? It's a question deliberated over since the first time someone quoted Al Jolson and the Jazz Singer.
Wait a minute, you ain't heard nothing yet.
How can the combination of certain images and sounds create something that sticks with us so effectively that, I don't know, every time you spot a pack of fava beans in the grocery store you think of it? And why would someone like me know the answer? Well, I've got no fucking clue. But this sure is a good excuse to watch some of my favourite movie scenes and edit to some catchy music. There's no concrete answer as to why something like a movie scene becomes iconic, but I'll try and sound like I know what I'm talking about. Through film techniques like editing, cinematography, sound design and acting, a good movie scene really becomes one of those whole is greater than the sum of its parts situations. And to demonstrate this, I want to use 3 of my personal favourite film scenes. The first is from a little film you might have heard of recently named Call Me By Your Name. But before we really delve into the individual pieces making up a great movie scene, I think it all starts with one word. Fuck! Sorry, I just spilled my coffee. The word is subtext. Subtext is the implicit or metaphorical meaning relating to a literary text or film. And what I think a great film scene achieves is conveying this subtext in only a couple of minutes, or even seconds. It condenses the entire subtext of the film and packages it up into a few little shots. Not just the plot of the film, but the themes and messages it's trying to convey, and the goals of the protagonist, the overall tone of the movie. In the case of Call Me By Your Name, this is all achieved in the dance scene. And I mean, it'd be pretty easy to say that this scene sticks with me because of the song choice. Can't go wrong with a bit of psychedelic furs. But not only does this scene convey the subtext of the entire film, it also achieves one of the most important purposes of a film scene. And this might come as a bit of a shock, but it moves the story forwards. In his novel The Anatomy of Story, John Truby writes that to construct any scene, you must always achieve 2 objectives: determine how it fits into and furthers the overall development of the hero, and make it a good mini-story. It might sound obvious, but if a scene doesn't develop the protagonist or further their overall struggle and action within the story, then you have Dawn of Justice. In our first example, the protagonist Elio has already begun to develop feelings for Oliver, however hides them for a fear of scrutiny, be it from others or from within. And with the help of some good vibes, and a bit of whatever alcohol Italians like drinking, Elio works up the nerve to share a real moment with Oliver, for maybe the first time in the film. Literally just one long take conveys the nature of this entire scene and its implications for the plot. Elio has felt some jealousy over seeing Oliver kiss a girl, and as we watch Oliver dancing alone, we spend a bit of time in his head, then slowly dolly out and Elio finally swoops in. We don't need a shot of him standing and coming over, he just slides gracefully into the shot, if only for a little while before he finds a girl to divert his feelings towards. Conveys the subtext of the film as a whole? Check. Advances the plot? Check. Makes me think of Italian dance floors whenever Love My Way plays from my Spotify account? Yep. And speaking of Spotify, the film that really boosted the size of my Golden Oldies playlist is Dazed and Confused. That movie has a fucking good soundtrack. And another one of the greatest film scenes, the entrance into the Emporium. Now you could say that a lot of movie scenes stick with you purely based on a particular song used in the scene. For example, now whenever I hear Come On Eileen, I can't help but think of the prom scene from Perks of Being a Wallflower. Or whenever I hear Hurdy-Gurdy Man, I think of the first killing from David Fincher's Zodiac. But that doesn't make those scenes particularly great. What sets the Emporium scene apart from these other scenes is not only its use of a diegetic and decade-relevant song, but how it manages to capture the spirit of being a teenager. That's embarrassing. But how it manages to capture the spirit of being a teenager in 1970s Texas, aka the subtext. The energy of the Emporium, everybody living day by day and focusing on each moment, the feeling of graduating high school and taking everything one step at a time. What do I know about Texas in the 70s? Not much, but for better or worse, I know a lot about being a teenager. Oh my god! But for better or worse, I know a lot about being a teenager, and that's why I love this film so much. What was I doing? Oh, yeah, the analysis. So maybe this scene is more of a personal choice than the first, although the essentials for a technically successful film scene are still in there. Dazed and Confused is a little tricky because the whole film almost plays like one long scene, with a series of casual conversations and not a lot of what you'd call story. As John Truby writes, the beginning of the scene should frame what the whole scene is about. The scene should then funnel down to a single point. So the characters scoot into the Emporium and go their separate ways, and Mitch Kramer is introduced to Julie, who'll be back a bit later in the movie. And eventually the characters group up outside the Emporium. This is when a bunch of them drive off to go,
Yeah, like smoke pot.
Yeah.
and Don mentions pulling off a beer bus later, which I think is the single point of this small scene.
Hey, I got an idea.
What?
A beer bus later on.
Because the beer bus becomes one of the only stressful moments in this film later on. And if you've seen the movie, you know it's not even because anyone steals anything.
Don, give the beer back, man. I paid for the beer, man.
Anyway, aside from this personal pick, I think my last example of a great scene is something a lot of people can agree with. It comes from a little indie film you might have heard of named A New Hope, or just Star Wars if the year was 1977. Now where the twin sun scene differs from the rest is in its actual implications for the plot, because it's almost more of a moment than an actual scene. There's no mini 3-act structure, no funneling down to a single point. However, it still meets the criteria of what I think a great movie scene is. Pretend you know nothing about Star Wars, Disney, or Solo, a Star Wars story.
In London, after a month, almost 600,000 flocked to see the film.
The year is 1977 and you stumble into a movie theatre just as this scene starts. You don't know what the movie is or who this character is, but what you see is a teenage boy stepping out of his strange desert farmhouse and staring at two twin suns just as they're setting in what looks like a different galaxy than your own. This is all you need to know that this teenage boy, whatever his name is dreaming of something greater than a farm and maybe even greater than his planet. But he knows that this dream is out of reach, so he walks dejectedly back inside. And that's why this scene is great, because you don't need any lazy exposition to know who the protagonist is and what his goals and struggles are. Although unfortunately this theatre you're in can't play the John Williams score because they're trying to avoid getting flagged for copyright.